Hey guys, Caitlin here. Today we are going to talk about Logic of English Essentials. So this is the language arts program that I used with my oldest this past school year. And I want to do not only a review and just share what we thought about it, but also kind of explain the Essentials program because it is very different than Logic of English's earlier program, which is called Foundations, and it's a little confusing. I was very overwhelmed at the beginning, so I'm just gonna kind of walk you through how it works, what it looks like, all that kind of stuff. So if you are not familiar with Logic of English, there is a Foundations section, which is for like your younger kids, and then there is Essentials, which is more like upper elementary, middle grades. Now you can do Essentials without having done Foundations, but most people, well, I won't say most, yeah, I don't know. I haven't done a survey or anything. I feel like most people who are doing Essentials, their kids have already done Foundations as younger students, and so they're just moving on to Essentials. However, there are quite a few people who decide to jump in when their child is a little bit older and the foundation stuff is a little too babyish for them, a little too, elementary for them, and so they move on to Essentials, and that is fine. You can absolutely do Essentials without having done Foundations, and it just gives you some information at the beginning of how to adjust that if you have not already seen that. So the way it works, if you're familiar with Logic of English Foundations, there's a level A book and a level B and C and D, and that's for, kindergarten, first, second-ish. We were finished with D after second grade. Some kids need to go further into third grade, whatever, but you just do each book and then you move on to the next book. Essentials is a little bit different. There are 4 books and they each have several units in it. So like here's units 1 through 7. The next book has units 8 through 15. The next book has 16 through 22, and then the final book 23 through 30. I don't have the books number 3 and 4 to show you, but there are about 7 units per book, and each unit has 5 parts. So theoretically, you would do 1 unit a week. So 5 days, 5 parts, 1 part per day, and then that would be a unit, and that would be 1 week. So theoretically, you would get through all 4 books, the 30 units, in 30 weeks of school. Lots of people take much longer than that because maybe they only do school 4 days a week, or their child needs to go a little bit slower through the parts and so they don't get done with a part a day. That was our case. That is, I feel like, pretty normal, pretty standard, especially your first time through Essentials. And so it does not always shake out to be 30 weeks of work or units or whatever, 30 weeks for the whole program. Okay, so I said the first time through that because in each book, there is a level A, a level B, and a level C, all in the same book. So when you are deciding on Essentials for your child, they will take a pre-test, placement test type thing, and that will let you know where they need to start. Do they need to start in level A, B, or C? And so then you go through all 30 units, however long that takes you, at the level that your child tested into. And then once you finish unit 30, let's say your child tested into level A, you would start back unit 1, level B, and you would go through all 4 books, all 30 units again for level B, and then start over again, unit 1, level C. And so some things are repeated and some things it differentiates in the book, and I'll show you that. What's level A, what's level B, what's level C. And so you could potentially go through this program 3 times if your child tested into level A and you decide to do level A and then circle back around level B, circle back around level C. So the first time you do it, it is quite a startup cost because you are having to buy multiple textbooks per year. For us, we went very slow and we got through 2 textbooks in a year. We could have gone faster and gone through another one, but honestly, I just didn't want to pay for it because for us, we were only planning to do this for 1 year, which I'll talk about in a second. But if you are planning to do this like for your child for a couple of different years, then yes, you have to buy a bunch of books up front, or you could buy I went ahead and bought 2 at a time because I knew we'd get through the first 2. You could buy 3 or 4, or you could just get 2, and then once you get through those 15 units, buy more. It's up to you. But that first year will probably be a bigger cost. And then the subsequent years should be a little bit cheaper because you already have your teacher's manual. So just something to think about as you're getting into it. Now, I said we were only doing this for 1 year. If you watch my other videos, you know this. If you don't, we do Classical Conversations. And the way Classical Conversations works is until your child is 9, you do like a certain set of curriculum, and you have to add in a language arts and a math curriculum at home. Once your child is 9, 4th grade-ish age, they add in a component of language arts. And they call that essentials, which is not the same as Logic of English essentials. It's a little confusing, but my son, he will be going into Classical Conversations essentials this coming year. So he finished Logic of English Foundations D at the end of 2nd grade, and then he would not start Classical Conversations Essentials until 4th grade. So we had that 3rd grade year where I was kind of trying to figure out what language arts stuff do we want to do for that year. And I talked to people who do Logic of English and also Classical Conversations, and most people said they just went on with Logic of English Essentials, and it was a fantastic prep for Classical Conversations Essentials. And so that's what we did for that year between finishing Logic of English Foundations, starting CC Essentials. We did Logic of English Essentials. But I went into that knowing I'm probably just going to use this for a year because, of course, plans can always change. But we intended to and are still intending to start CC Essentials in the fall. So I went into it knowing it was probably just going to be 1 year. And because of that, I did not go at a very fast pace. I don't know that I would have either, even if we were going to continue on with this program. But we just went really slow and leisurely, and we took breaks and we spread it out because I knew that this was just kind of, it'd be good preparation for CC, but it's an expensive program to purchase all the books. And so I was happy to just get through the 15 units that we got through. Had someone given me the books or said, I'll sell them to you for $5, I would absolutely get them and keep going with it. But because that's not the case, and this is not something that our family's going to use over and over and over again, I just stuck with these 2. Anyway, so that was kind of a long explanation, but so this can last you a couple of years, 2 to 3 years, depending on what level your child tests into, how many times you go through, or how long it takes you to go through all the units, that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's kind of how that works. So when you're purchasing, don't just purchase this and think this one book is going to be 1 year. This is technically about 7 weeks of work. For us, we stretched it out, so this became 1 semester, and this became our 2nd semester after Christmas. But like I said, we went really, really slow, just because I was in no hurry, and I was just kind of using it to fill a gap year there. So anyway, so you will need your teacher's guide for however many units you're planning to get at once. You will need a student workbook. There's a different one that goes with each book. So there's units 1 through 7, there's 8 through 15. They also recommend a spelling journal. It's not a requirement. You could totally do this in a spiral notebook, but I didn't want to fool with setting that up, so I just went ahead and got the spelling journal. If you are coming without having done foundations, they have a package that's essentials without having done foundations that gives you things like the phonogram tiles. You can see those on the board there, and some flashcards and stuff. If you've already done foundations, you'll get a different set because you already have a lot of the things. These do come with a pack of cards. I don't even know what mine are. We don't use those very often. But anyway, that's what you need to have to get started. There is a separate reading, I don't know if curriculum is the right word, but a separate component that is called the Essentials Reader, I believe is what it's called. And that's something else that you can purchase separate. It tells you in the teacher's guide, on what day you need to do what part of the reader. So it goes along with it, but it's not a requirement For my son, he is a very, very strong reader, and so I did not add in the reader. I think it's kind of geared towards more struggling readers, but it has some writing. It's not necessarily just for struggling readers, but we did not go with that. We just went with the main essentials curriculum. The main reason we were doing it is for spelling. My son, not a great speller. That was something I really wanted to work on this year. And so I was focusing more on the spelling and the grammar, not so much the reading. But if you need to do more reading and writing with your child, check out the essentials reader component. I just don't have that to show you. So anyway, I'm going to turn this around and show you the inside of the book in just a second, but just a few thoughts. The curriculum was good. It was good. I am not like gushingly in love with it the way I am Foundations, because it's a little more dry. It's not very colorful. It's just a little bit more boring, which on one hand, the kids are getting older, and so their curriculum is going to be not as exciting and fun and colorful and full of cut and paste activities and that kind of stuff, but it is just like a little, like, not nearly as exciting and fun to do as Foundations was. There's not games. Sometimes it will suggest a phonogram game, but other than that, there's not games the way the Foundations has a bunch of games. Now you can add in your own games if you want, of course, but they're not written into the curriculum. So the workbooks, one thing I don't like, and I don't know how they would fix this, so I don't know that like complaining about it is really gonna make a difference. But so with the workbooks, your child can go through them one time. It has all the levels, A, B, and C, but you can't use it for A, B, and C because the things that you repeat each time, there's not like a page to redo that next time you go through it, if that makes sense. I'll show you whenever we're going through it. So there's like a lot of empty pages you don't use. So for example, my son tested into level A, so we didn't do the level B and the level C pages, but if we were to reuse this and do it with level B, there's a lot of pages that are now filled in that we would need to have for B that we can't use, but then all the B pages that are blank that we could use. And then also there are assignments in the teacher book that there are not pages for in the workbook. So we would just like write it on the bottom of a different page. And I didn't love it, but I don't really know what the best solution is. Like, should they sell a smaller workbook that's just for A and another one just for B? Or should they sell a bigger workbook that has like 3 of each page if you're going to see that page in A, B, and C? I don't know, like, what's the best cost wise, what's the best like practicality, but I just thought it was a little bit annoying personally. So anyway, I do feel like this was good prep for Classical Conversations. So for those of you who are watching who are fellow CC parents, I can't say that for certainty because we have not actually started CC Essentials. So if my opinion changes, I'll let you know next year. But we did sit in on a CC class in the spring, an Essentials class, just to kind of get an idea. And several of the things they were doing in class, my son and I were doing at home with Essentials, with Logic of English Essentials. And I was like, he was already familiar with it. I was familiar with it. So that made me feel good. Like, okay, the stuff we're doing in Essentials is stuff that they're going to see when they're diagramming their sentences and naming the different parts of the sentences and that kind of stuff in CC. So I was really excited. I felt like we were on a good track. And in fact, it made me like more excited about Essentials because I've been kind of like floating along doing it, but not really knowing like what's the outcome here, what's our long-term goal. Once I sat in on a CC Essentials class and I saw that this was directly going to help that, I was like, okay, yes, now let's dig in a little bit more. So anyway, enough about that. Let me just flip this around and start showing you kind of the inside because it was very confusing for me the first couple of weeks. I was lost. Part of that is because I didn't sit down and really dig in and read it, but it took me a while to get my bearings and get find my footing because it's a little more confusing since it is all the levels at one time, and the way the units are broken up into the parts, that was hard for me. So I'm going to flip this around and I'm going to show you, so hopefully it's not so hard for you as it was for me. Alrighty, so let's look through this here. So first of all, highly recommend reading through this stuff at the beginning. I did not. I just kind of opened to Unit 1 and dove right in and regretted that because I was lost. But it's got these handy pages like these that show the symbols that you're going to see in the lesson. So you can see blue is A, green is B, orange is C. So when you get into the units, that's going to indicate to you what your child should be doing. So it kind of explains A, B, and C and how you make it more or less difficult. It talks about, you know, when you move to a different level, what do you do? How do you adjust it for your child? There's information about the Essentials Reader that I mentioned. So lots of good, just getting started stuff that I recommend reading. Then it talks a little about handwriting. If you've been through Logic of English Foundations, you know, you've already done handwriting. And then it explains how they mark the phonograms. Then there's a bunch about spelling analysis, which if you have not gone through Foundations, you may not be familiar with spelling analysis. It's very thorough, gives a lot of good information about how spelling analysis works, how to cue your child with the spelling. So let me look at that, tons of pages. So then here we have the scope and sequence for this particular book. And here's the placement test. You can also download this from their website, print it off, which is what I did, or you can make a copy of this on your computer, on your copy or whatever. But your child will take this, and this determines what level they go into. So some of the things, here's phonemic awareness. Based on how they score, that tells you if they need to do some pre-lessons or not. So those are just telling you if they do pre-lessons or not. Mostly what tests them into A, B, or C is the spelling. So pretty much based on how well they spell is what is going to put them into A, B, or C. And a little bit about the reading as well. It says if they read fewer than 5 words correctly, skip the spelling portion and follow level A. So this kind of just gives you an idea of where your child needs to start. If they need the pre-lessons, there are 10 of them, A through J or something like that. And for us, though he did test into level A because of his spelling, we did not need the pre-lessons. These are mostly, I feel like, for people who have not had Foundations or maybe just need a little bit of a review from Foundations. But a lot of it is like blending sounds together, handwriting, and phonograms. So there's blending compound words, play phonogram memory, a little bit about handwriting. So that's kind of what it repeats over and over again. So if your child knows the phonograms decently, then you probably don't need to do these. Now, if you do not have the phonograms mastered, that is okay, because you're going to see them every single day, basically, in the units of Essentials. So if they're new to the phonograms, you're going to keep going through those. If you haven't seen the phonograms, you may end up wanting to skip some of those, because we did. Because we have gone through phonograms so much for the last 3 years, well, 4 years now, that it was a lot. And he didn't need all that practice. So of course, adjust it to your child. So anyway, here's what a unit looks like. Tells you what materials you need. There's teacher information down the side. This right here, part 1, somehow I did not see this for the first couple of weeks, and I was just floating around with like this 1.1, there's 1.2, they're really long, these units, and 1.10, and I was like trying to, there's 1.13, I was trying to break it up based on like, okay, there's 14 of these, how do I divide this up? Somehow I did not, I don't know, but I missed part 1, and then part 2, and later I realized that's like day 1, day 2, day 3 type thing. There's part 3, words in context. Once I figured that out, then I was able to just schedule that as each one was a day, unless we needed to go slower, that was fine. But it took me a while to realize that there's like 5 parts per unit, so 5 days per unit. I don't know. Anyway, so this is what unit 1 looks like. I'm gonna actually go to a unit further on, because I feel like the first few units were a little different, and then it sort of started repeating, not in a bad way, but like a familiar routine. But here's like the spelling analysis. You can see this is all blue. This is level A. There's level B. There's level C. So if you're doing A like we did, you just ignore pages for B and C. You just skip that. For example, here's where this goes back to the spelling they did on day 2, but you're supposed to identify the nouns. Well, if you had the A list, here are your nouns. If you had the B list, here are your nouns. If you had the C list, here are your nouns. So, all right, I'm gonna flip to let's go to unit 4. So here's a unit. You've got kind of your information about what's going on in the unit, the things that you need, spelling rules. So here we go. So part 1 is always new phonograms. Because again, this is assuming you have not done foundations. And so it's teaching you the phonograms, oi, and ez. So we already knew those because we've done foundations. So I just reviewed this with my son pretty quickly. So you talk about the new phonogram. And if you are doing C, you also have an advanced phonogram. If you're not doing C, you skip that. If you did not do handwriting previously with foundations, it gives you what handwriting to use, some teacher tips, some interesting information. And then it has you practice phonograms. It talks about schwa, which this is something we did talk about in foundations, but we go over it again in essentials. Okay, so and then there's, if you're doing the essentials reader, optional, the essentials reader, that's what you would do that day for the essentials reader. So that's part 1, which, like I said, once I figured it out, I started making that our day 1 of the unit. Okay, then part 2, building words. Day 2, part 2 is always the spelling. So it tells you to review the phonograms, and then you're talking, exploring some sounds and things, but mostly it is spelling. There's some stuff to write in your spelling journal. There's an essentials reader thing if you do the reader. Here's your spelling words for that unit. And so you go through and you spell those with your child. All right, there's B and C, so we skip on those. And then there's day 3 or part 3. And this part is more about your parts of speech. So it has you review your phonograms, has you practice your spelling, go over the spelling rules that you've been talking about. And then you are taking the spelling list that you did yesterday and you're identifying the nouns. And you're identifying some non-count nouns. And you're turning the nouns from your spelling list into plural nouns. And you're identifying the article adjectives. And then you're identifying parts of speech. Okay? And sometimes it gives the answers, sometimes it doesn't. But like for this example, here's the answers for A, and then here's B, here's C. Let me show this in the workbook too. That would probably be helpful. Okay, so here's the workbook pages that go with Unit 4. We've got a phonogram game that they included in there. And then, well, we're doing some consonants and vowels. This is what I was talking about where it will say like practice your phonograms and then not give that in the workbook. So we would just have to squash it there at the bottom. Here's syllables and schwa. There's the spelling list. So on the first day, they just do their spelling words and they don't do this part. This is then on day 3, you go back and you identify the part of speech. And in this one, they were writing them, the ones that were nouns, writing them plural. And then also on day 3, when they are identifying the parts of speech, here's that right there. If you were in B, you would do that one. If you were in C, you would do that one. There's like 2 dictation sentences. Again, there's not like lines for that in the workbook, so we just wrote it at the bottom of the workbook. And then let's go back to this. Okay, there's the 2 dictation phrases that it's given that we just wrote at the bottom of our page. So then day 4 here, we kind of talk more about writing sentences. So we've taking what we've done on days 1, 2, and 3 and now putting it into action. So again, it has you do some phonogram practice, it has you do some spelling practice and review, and then it gives you some vocabulary. There's the level A, there's B, there's C. So for us, we would just do what was in blue. And then more dictation, writing sentences, reading, and then if you are doing the essentials reader, that's right there. So here we're writing the o'clocks, and then we had these 4 dictation phrases. There's nowhere to put them in the workbook, so we just wrote them at the bottom. We skip, the workbook page for B and C, and then read the phrases in your workbook. My son is an excellent reader, so we mostly just skipped that stuff because he's been reading much harder stuff than that. And then finally, part 5 or day 5, that is your review. And So review your grammar, review, if you're in C, review the vocabulary, test your phonograms, review the spelling things that you learned. Here's dictation again. And then if you're doing Essentials Reader, there's that. So on that day, it does give you a page to review the phonograms, but it doesn't on other days. So there's kind of what day 5 looks like. So the phonograms, spelling rule we learned this week, the syllables and schwa, grammar, and the dictation for the sentences. So on the review day, it does give the place for the dictation. It doesn't on the other days. And that is what one full unit looks like. So we typically did one part per day, except a lot of times we would just, on the part 2 for the spelling, we would do just spelling analysis because my son hates spelling analysis. And so I would just get him to do that. And then the rest of part 2 on another day. So we usually split up our part 2 day because of the spelling. And so that's what a unit looks like. Now this is just a side note for my CC people. Once we went and visited CC Essentials and realized how much this identifying parts of speech was also being done in CC Essentials, I was like, oh, let's work a little bit more on this. So this is the 8 through 15 units. So this, 8 through 15 units workbook. So this was much later on in the year. Once I realized that, I actually started having my son do A, which is the level he was on, but also B and C. He was easily able to do that part and do all the levels. Now, if you are planning to repeat Logic of English Essentials, you're not necessarily supposed to do this because you're going to go back and you get this later. But we were not, and this is something that I knew he was going to be seeing in Essentials for CC. So I went ahead and have him do levels B and C of the identifying the parts of speech, because that has a lot to do with CC Essentials. Now the other things, the other levels, like the vocabulary and the grammar, I did not do for B and C. But with just those particular identifying the different parts of speech, we did do that. So that's just a little side note thing if you're going into CC Essentials. All right, and then last thing I want to show you is just what's at the back of the book. So you've got all your basic phonograms and spelling rules and advanced phonograms, morphemes, which if you're in A, you barely even use the morphemes. So we did not hardly use this, but if you're in B or C, you have more of those. And then something I wanted to show you is that the scope and sequence for all 30 units is in the back of each book. So the front of the book has the scope and sequence just for that particular book, but the back of the book has the scope and sequence for all the units. And the reason I'm telling you that is because it has the spelling list for all of the units, A, B, and C. So if you're like me and you've only done 1 through 7 and 8 through 15, but perhaps want to keep working with your child on spelling, I can look ahead and use the spelling list from 22 and 30 and all that stuff, and I can add this on and do this in the summer, or do this in addition to CC Essentials later, because I have all that here without purchasing the other books. Now, of course, if I want all the rest of it, the grammar and the spelling rules and all that, then I need to get the other books. But for just the spelling, that's already in the back, FYI, if you need some spelling lists to use. Also, because I forgot to show it, this is what the spelling journal looks like. So it just has each phonogram, sometimes more than once, because it'll be put together with different sounds, but your child can write down words that go with those sounds. So like I said, you can absolutely use a notebook for this. I didn't actually love the spelling journal, but we used it because we had it. So there we go. Okay, I know that was long, but I really wanted you to be able to see thoroughly what a Essentials unit is going to look like and how that works, so that you're not lost whenever you get started. It really is a great program. You know, after I got through those first few weeks where I was confused and overwhelmed and kind of like, this is a little boring, it really is a great, thorough program. We did not use it in its entirety this year, partly because I knew we were just doing it for a year. Also because we had a hard school year. I have a toddler who is into everything, and I just couldn't spend tons of time every day sitting down and doing school with my older kids. And so, you know, we didn't practice the phonograms every day, though we really didn't need to. We didn't practice the spelling every day, even though we did need to do that. And in hindsight, I wish I'd had him practice the spelling words every single day, because he didn't do as well in spelling as I would have liked this year. But we loved identifying the parts of the speech in those sentences towards the end, because I mean, he enjoyed that anyway, but then also when we saw how that related to CC Essentials, we knew that was going to be really good practice. So it was a good program. I'm really happy we did it. If we were not doing CC, I would be continuing with Logic of English Essentials. So I hope that's helpful as you are trying to make a decision for your own family, or if you are just, you already know you're doing Essentials, but you want to know kind of what it looks like and like how to prepare yourself for it. You know, I hope that was helpful to kind of see it and help and have me point out the different things. Definitely sit down and read through those first pages and read through a unit thoroughly. Don't just open it on day one to teach to your son, because that, or your daughter, because that's what I did and didn't work out well for me. So I wish I'd done a little more prep work. Anyway, other than that, that's it. You just saw the flashlight a second ago. My toddler is up from his nap, so I'm gonna go take care of him. But hope that was helpful. Thanks for hanging out with me. Bye, guys.